You are listening to the Sacred Geometry Portal podcast, where each Monday musing plus one in-depth interview per moon takes you through the portal to the patterns of nature, the architecture of the cosmos, and the divine language of our minds. Your host, Elizabeth Diane, expands your perception of the world and the awe of creation. With a light heart, she encourages an exploration to find the truth as it is evident to you. Every episode opens doors to self-empowerment, demystifies the power of symbology and archetype, intersects relationships with matter and spirit, then circles back to ground in these seeds of life into the kind of wisdom you can apply to your being, soul, and purpose. Welcome to the Sacred Geometry Portal podcast.
Hello and welcome to another Sacred Geometry Portal podcast with my special guest this full moon, Seth Adam Hargett. Seth is a gifted inventor, a musician, a craftsman who, through the culmination of his life experiences and journey of transformation, has been moved and inspired to create the OmniCore wave field technologies. His divinely inspired instruments of elevated frequency exemplify universal laws and sacred knowledge that help the collective awaken to fundamental universal truths and help deepen one's understanding and relation between the self, the cosmos, and Source Creator. Thank you for tuning in, and I believe you will find this podcast to be both insightful, amazing, mind-blowing, and inspiring. So welcome, Seth. It's wonderful to be talking to you again, this time on Zoom. Last time I saw you, we were in person, but welcome to the Sacred Geometry Portal podcast.
Well, thank you, Lacey. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to sharing what I have here today.
Likewise, super excited. And of course, I'll encourage people to check out this podcast on YouTube if they want to see what you've got, because it's amazing. Both the OmniCore that's sitting there in front of you and the graphics behind you. But I know we have a lot to talk about that doesn't necessarily require the visuals. And I'm really excited to introduce people to this technology. I don't know a whole lot about it myself yet, but I have experienced it when we were in town in Mount Shasta and you had one of your newer devices with you, and I was really drawn to it. I was surprised because I've seen a lot of different sacred geometric copper-based models that have one function or another, and yours really drew me in. And then you handed it to me, and I felt so much energy. The first thing I got was a wave of love. So that really that felt great to me, had me wondering more. So I'd love for you to share with us today. Let's start with your story. What led you to build this? And what is the OmniCore? You may want to start with what it is. I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, well, you hit some key words there. You said it drew me in, and I felt a wave. And you're already onto it because it is the wave. It's the cosmic universal wave. It's a model of everything, basically, because everything is made of waves and frequency and vibration. This is common knowledge now, but most people, when they think of a wave, they're like, well, what is a wave? What do you see in your mind when you think of a wave?
Yeah, like the ocean comes to my mind first.
Right. Or a two-dimensional, a lot of people see like a two-dimensional, thing, but it's like, okay, I'd like to know more about the wave, and I'd like to see it mapped out more thoroughly. And that's been my journey. And you also said it draws me in. It draws energy in, just like your lungs draw air in, and it and it extracts the oxygen from the air and supplies, vitality, while then it also goes back out into the universe. So it disperses the energy as well. So it's an infiltration and out process, which is the wave, compression, expansion.
Beautiful. I love that description because it gives people a more three-dimensional or maybe multi-dimensional idea of what a wave is because, typically, like you said, we might see it like a sine wave or, a two-dimensional drawing of a wave. And this gives people a much better understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. And those two-dimensional images are actually spirals. So it does appear like this, but if you were to look at it three-dimensionally, you're going to see spiral. You're going to see conical shapes interpenetrating, compressing, expanding in shape and form.
Mm-hmm. And I see in your model that you've got those spirals too. So
oh yes,
all over the place.
It's all about the spiral. There's two interlocking coils. One represents the in-breath and one the out.
Wow.
And one is compressing, one is expanding. And then we also have the particle, the wave and the particle being all of matter, crystallized in the center. And matter appears as spheres, crystallized spheres. And that represents, everything that takes form as a particle.
Yes, that is cool. You said all particles appear as crystallized form.
Mm-hmm.
That is for people who are used to standard chemistry or, studies in science. That's a new concept. So explain what you mean by crystallized form.
Well, all form is crystallized thought. And the crystallization process is the most elementary process of nature. It's like it is the first process when things begin to, materialize, it crystallizes. So in that sense, all matter is a crystallization of thought and energy.
Wow. Beautiful. Because again, so many people are just used to the physical reality, and yet so much of what I love about sacred geometry is it helps us bridge spirit and matter.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that bridge, the intertwining and the combining of the subtle and the gross, as above, so below. And as for my journey, it began, I guess, long before this lifetime. But in this life, I've always been, deeply connected and felt like spiritual, even as a child. And I grew up in the country, so I've always had my time to be alone in nature and connect. And but I was also a country boy from Indiana, so that came with its own, closed-minded parameters that the Midwest has. But I was blessed with a beautiful childhood and upbringing in nature, so I could cultivate this connection. But I felt to go further with it. I felt the calling at a young age. I left the path of mediocrity a long time ago as a teen. I decided I wasn't going to take the same path that most people were taking. I wanted to just throw myself into the crucible, so to speak, of life, and start my initiation process. So, and that's all alchemy, right? It's the hero's journey. It's the process of refining the soul.
Yes.
And even as a child, my parents, I remember this story, or I remember this memory of when my parents were trying to get me to write my name. I'm like, here's how you write your name, S-E-T-H. And I said, no, that's not my name. And I said, here's my name. And I would write circles with a dot in the middle, which is like the symbol for the sun.
Yes.
And crosses, like plus signs. And I would just write them in repeating, alternating order. And it's like, was that source code? Was that ones and zeros? It's like, is this me remembering what I really am, which is, it's OmniCore, really. The circle and the dot and the cross being the cubic wave fields, or the cubic matrix that the wave fields move through. So that's the two elements of the OmniCore, fundamental elements. So I had an awareness of that at a young age. And I just left home and started to travel around with very little money, just a lot of faith. And my journey began. I went to Mount Shasta, was
Mhm.
one of my first places, and met
And
some
what
really
called you to the
amazing.
mountain? Do you have any particular story about?
Well, I was doing a lot of research online about just spiritual places,
Yeah.
places of magic,
Hmm.
and I'd read some things about the legends of Lemuria and Atlantis. I was fascinated with ancient history.
Yeah.
Felt like I was connecting with some ancient memories,
Sounds like you were.
and I was searching for community, spiritual community,
Hmm.
um, others like myself. And Shasta came up somehow,
Yep.
and I just took off in my car and headed west. And I'd already been out west to see my uncle and aunt. I knew I loved the mountains, and I just made it a whole pilgrimage. I stopped at the Grand Canyon and other places, beautiful places, with Shasta as my final destination. And I continued to come back to Shasta for many years after that first visit, and eventually settled there for a couple of years, where I started to meet some very interesting people who opened my mind. Um, One in particular, his name was Art Carr. He's like a father to me,
Hmm.
and he actually introduced me to Walter Russell.
You got to meet Walter Russell?
Well, he
Or
introduced me to his
through him?
work. Yeah, 'cause
Gotcha.
he always had the best stories, and I said, just give me a book, recommend me a book. You're so wise, and so he didn't even hesitate. He said Walter Russell, Secret of Light.
Mm.
So,
I need to
and I
read.
kind of forgot that. I didn't actually get back to that until later, because this whole journey had to play out.
Hmm.
And after living in Shasta for some time, um, I felt called to a place called Dominur, Italy. It's one of the most realized spiritual communities probably on the planet,
Yeah.
because they've just gone to the nth level of creating this community where
Yeah.
they have their own schools, they grow their own food. They're like a federation. They have their own currency.
Hmm.
So I was just fascinated with that, and that's where I learned about Selfica, what they call Selfica,
Okay.
and it's a form of technology used for healing and soul development, which employs the spiral and a lot of copper, as well as different gems and minerals and alchemical liquids, they call them.
Hmm.
And that was kind of my whole introduction to like a different type of spiritual technology. And I started to think about, doing my own experiments with copper after that visit.
Right.
And also went to Findhorn, Scotland,
Hmm.
where I saw the largest Genisa crystal, which is a vector equilibrium or a cube octahedron spherical form. It's basically the four rings you see
Hmm.
on the four interlocking rings of the outer part of
Yes.
the OmniCore. That's called a Genisa crystal, and that was given that name by Dr. Daryl Langham. And Art Carr also told me about Daryl Langham. Interesting connection there. He actually grew up down the street from Daryl Langham,
Uh-huh.
and he would walk by his laboratory and try to like peek into the windows to see what he was doing. He's eccentric spiritual scientist that Art was just fascinated by, and eventually got to meet Dr. Daryl Langham, and he introduced him to the what he called the Genisa crystal.
Hmm.
And he was experimenting with how the four interlocking rings combined in such a way actually accelerate the growth rate of plants. He was a botanist, and he was researching the growth rate of plants and how different geometries affect plants and living things.
Hmm.
And he found the Genisa crystal actually accelerated the growth rate, as well as just created a more robust, healthy plant.
Yeah.
And that was his contribution.
Wow.
So I've combined his work with Dr. Walter Russell's,
Uh-huh.
with the Russell coil. And that's really how it all began, with all this traveling. And it was a search for the unifying truth. I wanted something to kind of put it all in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like everything we've learned, it's like, how can we bring it together and make a model and create a tool that can help us not only remember, you know, the basic fundamental, you know, laws,
Mm-hmm.
but also to apply that in a conscious way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was the search for the map of the soul,
Mm.
and a dive. It was a deep dive into the mystery, the occult, mysticism, hermetics. So I
Sure.
studied many other forms of, you know, spirituality and philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and you see so many corresponding, you know, connections. It's like they're all referring to the wave,
Right.
and then you see all these symbols
Mm-hmm.
like the Maltese cross, the Dorje, the Sri Yantra,
Reading
the
that a lot.
caduceus,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
The Celtic spiral, the yin and the yang.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're all referring to the wave.
Beautiful. They are. I understand what you're saying. And we have those symbols in are usually like two-dimensional because they've been in ancient times carved into something or recorded on, you know, a papyrus or something like that,
Right.
that something in our mind, in our consciousness understands more about them in other dimensions, or gives us a key when we start to do the kind of searching that you embarked on, to say, what is this Sri Yantra or the Dorje?
Right.
And then somebody might tell you something like it's bringing energy, but it's like, okay, well, there's a center point there. There's a crossing point. What is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be significant because what else is there?
Mhm.
And
Right.
and it just leads you to uncover and understand more and more. But when we're talking about the waveform, and it's something like you described as inhaling and exhaling, then it makes sense how we would need a symbol to represent it, you know, without the recording of instruments that could pick
Yeah.
up what our third eye might see if we had the grace of that kind of experience to visualize it or have it shown to us.
Totally.
So yeah, thank you for sharing all the symbology and how that ties into this as well. You mentioned a few things that I'd like to just touch on for
Sure.
listeners who maybe this is all new to them. Um, you know, don't want to assume too much, but copper, of course, conducts energy. And I assume that's why you're working with copper. In addition, of course, like the Egyptians and a lot of ancient cultures worked with copper. You know, I forget, you know, how many millennia, you know, the work began with copper, but at
Yeah.
some point people must have discovered, yeah, there's a lot of energy with this. And so I assume that's why you're using copper. And
Yes, copper conducts electricity. It's an amazing metal to work with, in my opinion. It's a great medium, because it's still soft, it's workable.
Mhm.
It's just easy to work with. It's also beautiful. I also do gold plates, you know, gold and silver plates,
Uh-huh.
but copper is definitely special. I think the Egyptians prized it over gold.
Yeah, I think you're right. They did. I know they use copper with zinc in, I think the zinc was the yin and held in the left hand, copper in the
Hmm.
right hand with the left foot facing the sun, left foot forward. There's some work that I've heard research, somebody that's researched information about those rods that you see them holding.
Oh yeah, the rods.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, awesome. So, and then you've got every circle around the Janisa crystal is also like twisted. So it's got its own coils.
Yes,
I
this is
think
also known as
Mhm.
tensor technology, the use of twisting the copper, and many people may have heard of Slim Sperling and his work. which employs certain measurements, cubits and whatnot,
Wow.
and just creating rings and other type of devices. But yeah, it's crucial that it's twisted, two strands twisted, and
Uh-huh.
that, like you said, creates its own dynamic of energy and amplification. So this is an amplifier. This is like an antenna. It's going to amplify whatever you put into it.
Uh-huh.
So we put the crystal in there, it's amplifying those properties of the crystal. And we can also program the crystal with our thoughts and intentions.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's used as a means of, manifesting or precipitating what it is you want to create.
Right. And again, crystals have been used for a long time, and people are just now making that connection, if they haven't yet, that they have piezoelectric properties and they're used in computers now because
Yep.
they can store information.
They're
So,
the memory keepers, the timekeepers.
beautiful. And then the Janisa crystal, as I see what you mean, that it has the four circles that are kind of equally spaced around a sphere so that
Mhm.
their intersection points create like the vertices for the cuboctahedron.
Yes,
And the
it's a cubot.
cuboctahedron, yeah, which is really cool. And I had forgotten that because sometimes I'll look and I'll see like a Merkaba in there. But I need to double check if that's accurate or not. But I definitely
Yeah, because you got the
see.
triangle pointing up and the triangle pointing down when you
Yes.
look through the corners.
Yes.
Yeah, and it told the Merkaba, and every shape appears within the cube octahedron. And
Yes.
it's also it's like the Metatron's cube, right? It's
Mhm.
basically the same thing. They're all basically the same thing and just expressed a little differently. So
Yes.
yeah, it's tying into the cubic grid, the invisible cubic grid
Yeah.
that creates the space for the illusion of space and time, that creates this illusion of the wave moving.
Right.
But and Walter, one of the greatest things Walter said, most important things, was that waves, that light doesn't actually travel. It's not actually traveling. It's reproducing itself, and it's also an illusion. It's if you can imagine like a mirrored box or a mirrored cube
Mhm.
being mirrored, infinitely creating this quantum mirroring that creates the illusion of all this space and time.
That's phenomenal. I love expanding my mind with these concepts. And then it has me looking at the world in a whole new way. Just to think
Yeah.
about that. They're waves, what they appear as waves, but it's like a particle. Tell me if this is a good paraphrasing. A particle of information rebirthing itself or regenerating itself.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah. So the,
Like,
the light that
mhm.
the light that reaches you from the sun is not the same light that left the sun. It's been regenerated.
Right.
So
Beautiful.
it's
I-
nothing actually travels, because
yeah.
and this is what makes teleportation possible, because
Right.
all places are in the same place, and all time is now, and it's all
Mm,
one. So that's
mhm,
what makes that possible. It makes it possible to travel through deep space for these extraterrestrials
mhm.
that understand this simple concept, or an ascended master who's just realized he's one with the universe. They can travel using just this awareness.
Beautiful. And I want to let people know that, there really is something to that. And it is a shift of awareness. I always advocate for, like um, holistic balance. I think it's great. Some people are maybe more intuitive, maybe others more logical, linear thinkers. And when we, um, whether our entry point is maybe more linear or more intuitive, it doesn't matter. We can, take in all of this and it gives us more information to work with. I know teleportation is possible. I had an experience of it once myself after doing a long walking meditation practice. And the My phone being, I guess that's affirmation, but I turned that off. Sorry about that. Yeah, I did a walking meditation, very focused. And when my heart started to expand with the joy of just connecting with my intention, I found myself on the opposite side of a field.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
there's more detail to it. It's really fascinating story.
Mhm.
I'd rather talk more about what you're doing and get back to that another time. And I have it in, when people subscribe, they can get that story in an email as well.
Mhm.
But I experienced something that for myself, I could verify for myself. I can't offer you proof, but I have for myself that experience, that truth. And
Yes.
then I've witnessed someone else teleporting, essentially
Right.
vanishing and appearing somewhere else. And
Mhm.
when we start to think in the concept that you just explained, that you learned through your studies, and Walter Russell being one of, one of them that has explained a lot to you, just that there's something regenerative happening all the time, the in-breath and the out-breath, and this regeneration and the illusion of waves going out through this construct of space-time. It gets us to really be able to mentally understand and accept that there's
Totally.
ways to connect outside of space-time. And of course, we've been watching medicine men, and
Oh, yeah.
gurus and all kinds of gifted people, spiritually, what we
Right.
might think of as spiritually. They've been doing this for a long time, and science just hasn't been able to explain
Right.
it in a way that they can do under their rules and conditions, which I think are valid. I mean, they're useful,
Yeah.
but there's more.
Right.
Yeah.
They're tapping into the knowing mind of God instead of the thinking mind of, man or
Mhm.
woman. It there's a dual thinking that happens, dualized thinking when it's in the simulation, whereas the mind of God is beyond that, and it's knowing, and
Yeah.
that's where intuition comes from. And to me, the wave field simulation is basically God's OmniCore, a device created by God
Yeah.
as a means to know and experience itself through the illusion of separation and remembering.
I can totally agree with that. The things that you're talking about here have come to me first through my intuition and meditation as truth. And then I'm seeing it happening, like your experience in building the OmniCore, and I'm saying, I know this. I know this already.
Yeah, right. We
Beautiful.
all do. It's within all of us.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
within all of us. And just the spiral appearing everywhere in nature, the
Yes.
Fibonacci, the golden mean. We have spirals on our fingertips. We have a spiral on our scalp, on our toes.
Hmm.
We're being compressed, into matter. Yeah, it's everywhere. DNA, um, the brain synapses.
Hmm.
When we form a thought, it's formed in the exact same way. It's the two cones coming together and meeting in the middle to
Isn't that
create
interesting? Yeah.
crystallize the thought.
Crystallize a thought. Beautiful. Yeah, I've seen, of course, I was taught that it's a linear, you have a sender and a receiver. And it was recently when science was starting to say, well, wait, it can go the other way too. But it makes more sense that they're meeting in the middle and creating that crystallization of thought.
Yes, it compresses from both ends,
Uh-huh.
whatever it is. Comes in and then it breathes out through the equator, and it
Mm.
goes out like a disc or a ring, energetically,
Mm.
and then back to the other end. And these points would be like the 0 point energy,
Uh-huh.
or
Uh-huh.
the non-material, and this would be the material. So you have the opposites. So this would be the center of uh,
Hey.
the non-material and the center of the material.
And you're pointing at the material being the very center of the omnicore, where the crystal is in the very center.
Yeah,
And
matter,
all of the,
non-matter.
yeah, and the non-matter is like the north and south pole, so to speak,
Right,
of the
right.
spirals that go inside of the omnicore. Beautiful. This is so fascinating. I'm excited. And you
It
mentioned,
really is.
yeah, and how it connects with so many things. This is, what everything we're talking about here is why I love to encourage people to start drawing sacred geometry, because it's one facet and it leads
Yeah.
to then,
Yeah.
for some people, it makes it easier to start visualizing multidimensionally. So to look at what you've built and kind of go, oh, I see that. I see
Mhm.
that. They can look from different angles and start to see things.
Yes.
And you mentioned
Yeah.
golden. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Golden mean. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I invented the core, OmniCore, as a model first, just to help myself understand
Mhm.
and to help others understand and to have something I can just like meditate on and look at. And then next I've discovered, um, because my friend who is a healer,
Yeah.
she says, no, this is more than a model. She starts putting it in the hands of her clients, and I start hearing all this stuff. People are having experiences. It's like, oh wow, this is much more.
Uh-huh.
This is a tool, and ultimately we are it. So we are the technology, but it's like a stepping stone. It can help people to accelerate that awareness.
Well, I really respect that you can see that and help people understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so many times somebody has an object and they're just focused on selling the object, but
right.
this comes with a reminder that it's a tool and
Mhm.
it's helping show you what you really are.
Yeah,
And that's,
bingo.
yeah, and it's yeah, it's so true. In my perspective and from my meditations, I can see that. And your healer friend probably then sees the potential then for healing, because I'd imagine, one of the healers who acknowledges that she's just a conduit, helping
That's
the
right. She
person
does.
come back to their wholeness.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have chills all over. Feels great. Oh, wow. So I'd like to maybe hear a little more, if you'd like to share about how your journey to creating this. How exactly did
Oh
this
yeah.
come together for you?
Oh yeah. So I left off with Finhorn on the journey.
Yeah.
That's where I saw the largest Janissa crystal I've ever seen. I think it was like, I want to say 8 feet or 9 feet tall diameter. You could walk inside, and
Yeah.
it was in the center of their garden. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Finhorn, but what put them
Yes.
on the map in the 70s, they had the largest, they were known for their like massive vegetables that they were growing in this like really terrible soil, supposedly.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, well, this explains like how they're, so they were working with the Janissa sacred geometry, as well as they claimed they were working with the elementals, uh, nature spirits,
Yeah.
and also amending the soil with seaweed was a big part of it too, they said. But yeah, so all my journeys were just kind of culminating this awareness of not only sacred geometry, but how we can apply it and how it can be used for healing and growth.
Mhm.
Damenher was using it to heal cancer. They had beds where you could lay, and they had these devices that move over your body, and they were also using a lot of magnets
Uh-huh.
with the copper. So and yeah, Falco, the founder of Damenher, it was really all coming from him,
Uh-huh.
and he claimed to be a reincarnation of an Egyptian master. And his work is just phenomenal. He's no longer with us, but I definitely recommend checking out Damenher, the
Yeah.
Temples of Humankind and Selfica.
Okay.
This place just changed my whole perception and awareness on what we can actually do if we decide to come together, and create community.
Mm. I'm
And
there.
that's another thing I want to create, and through the OmniCore, I want to magnetize, the new earth communities that we're all about.
Yes.
And I think it's coming.
I
And
agree.
that's
I'm,
that's
I'm
that's
pretty
been
drawn
a
into it.
big part of the journey. Yeah, is
Mhm.
culminating that as well. But yeah, it was really just a desire to create something, that expresses the ultimate truth,
Mhm.
uh, the ultimate harmony, balance, order, beauty. Something we can really always fall back on. So I use the OmniCore visually. I don't even have to have one, right? If I'm,
Right.
getting ready to go out into public, I say OmniCore on, and I imagine it around me. I put myself like in the space of the crystal in the very center,
Mhm.
right? And just imagine the whole structure. And it can be moving. It really is moving. This is a process.
Mhm.
It's not actually a static shape. This is all motion, waves in motion. So when you visualize it, you can visualize it pulsing and moving and
Right.
breathing. And it's a great meditation tool in
Mhm.
that sense, not only to hold it during meditation, but to visualize it around you.
I can totally attest to that, that the vortex and visualization of that around you has been um, a really powerful practice for me. And I've done a few different methods, and then you're offering another, like you said, you can just visualize it now. You use it as a tool, you know it intimately, you felt it, you feel it when you hold it. And then I love how empowering that is, that you take that with you without having to take the physical object. So
Right.
you're not dependent on the physical object, but again, it's informing what's already within you.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Yeah. This is so exciting. Well, so that the OmniCore is what we've been talking about, and I'm seeing on your table you have another device, and of course you have some great
Ah,
graphics.
oh yeah. A lot of this is Walter Russell's art. So he
Okay.
was let's get into him a little bit because he is
Yeah.
really a fascinating person. He connected all the dots for me. I mean, after all of my research, I find Walter, and he's, he was an enlightened polymath. He
Mhm.
did so many things. He was a sculptor. He was an architect. He didn't even finish high school. This guy dropped out. He had a spiritual awakening, in nature, just meditating in nature as a young kid. And he lived around the period of Nikola Tesla, late 1800s, early 1900s. They were actually friends, and they traded
Wow.
notes. And Tesla really respected Walter, and he also said, after reviewing his work, he said, "This is way advanced." He said, "You need to walk this up for another 1,000 years until humanity's ready."
He knew what he was talking about.
And well, Walter was like, "Oh," Walter respected him, so he did until he met his beloved, and she was like his other half, the
Oh,
balance, male female balance, and they actually opened a school together. But she's like, "No, nope, that's got to come out. There's a reason you're here, and we're gonna open a school." Or she encouraged him, to bust it out. And so yeah, they opened the University of Science and Philosophy in West Virginia,
okay.
and they started teaching people. And sure, it was over a lot of people's heads, but a lot of people did get it. And there's actually a reemergence of his work now. People are really starting to jump on it again because I mean this. I read a lot of physics books, and it's mostly confusing. By the time you finish these, it's like equations. Like, okay, how does this bring it all together? Just have more questions, Well,
Oh,
Walter,
yeah.
being a spiritual scientist, he understood that it's all one, and that you can't omit creator from creation. These are just key things you can't do in order to
Right.
understand. And being an artist, he was able to put it all into beautiful charts and paintings. And not only that, but music. He was a musician. He was a sculptor. He
Yeah.
sculpted a lot of famous people. He was actually really famous in his time. But
Mm,
now we don't hear people don't really know about Walter on a large scale,
yeah,
which I would like to change. I mean, he should be taught in schools.
I agree.
Um, but he provided the most complete and comprehensive map of the wave.
Hmm.
That's for me. That's like the biggest thing he did,
Yeah.
because no one else was able to detail it like it's so in depth. So we have his work here, showing the wave fields and how we have the different life and death principles, mother and father principles coming together. And this is electricity and magnetism, right?
Right.
So electricity and magnetism are basically the same life force, but expressed in different ways. One is compressing, one is expanding, going back into the non-material or going into material. But it's the same. So electromagnetic really means, the balance of the positive and the negative. And the non-material being, creator's still electric or magnetic mind. We have creator's still magnetic mind that all is basically the womb of all life. So in essence, we never left the womb. We're just a lot of people are just, they think this is real.
Yep.
And until they realize it's not. It's a simulation.
Yes. Wow.
And yeah, Walter has been a huge guide for me. He also built a free energy device that he powered his school with, and you can't find the blueprints for that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But he said he ran his entire school on this device that he created. So this is the key to free energy. Basically, technology, it is beneficial to the degree that it is aligned with universal law. And it is detrimental to the degree that it deviates from natural law. So all the new earth technologies are going to be in harmony with universal law. And if you want to create free energy, all you have to look to is, the universal law. And how does it apply? It's going to be a pulsing, breathing mechanism.
Right.
And Walter had one. And unfortunately, they're not on the market.
Right. Yet. Maybe they will be. Maybe you're on the path too. Maybe he'll connect with you outside of space-time when the time is right. When we're all
Yeah,
ready.
I know I'm going to meet some wizards or people, a genius is going to see this and it's going to like all just click, and then he's going to invent free energy. I mean, I've already had, I've had visions of what it looks like, and I think it's going to be combining not only geometry and form, but light, sound, and also, motion of some kind, maybe water or some kind of moving, flowing aspect,
Okay, that's cool because I know somebody who's developed, I would say it's at least over Unity device that has been tested in one of the country's top labs at their highest security level with, patent attorneys present and some of the world's best nuclear engineers there and everything. And I'll just say this much about it. Yeah, it involved water. It involved very little input, and essentially you could harness both the plasma field from it and steam that was generated in a really safe small container.
Cool.
Very fast, just kind of instant. And so that gives me, just knowing about that technology gives me some insight then to what you're saying, that you envision it with some sort of water.
Yeah, it's going to bring all the elements together,
Yes.
Geometry being like form and earth, light being fire, sound being air, and then we got to have water in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Or maybe mercury, like I know some people say that these anti-gravity devices employ mercury, which is a fluid that rotates through a torsion field.
Right.
And then we have Victor Schauberger, who was also experimenting with water and creating vortex devices using water. Yeah. There's something there. Yeah, there's definitely something there in developing that. So if anybody out there has any ideas, definitely hit me up. Let's brainstorm.
Well, we'll connect further. I'll link you up the way
Oh, cool. Right on.
some of
We
the.
just don't want to get blacklisted, right?
No. It'll all unfold the way it's meant to, and yeah, I'd love to share more with you and share more with our listeners. As you know, I don't have permission to share things, and I don't know everything either. So yeah, but I might be able to give you some introductions, and we'll figure out
Great.
next
Yeah.
OmniCore and technologies. So this is super fascinating. It explains the yeah, I suddenly my mind was going back to the person that I know that developed this technology lately, and I kept going, why am I thinking of that person so much now? I keep thinking of why is that coming up? And then we have
Right.
this today. Yeah, and you, I believe, so you developed this while you're in your time in Mount Shasta, is that right?
Yeah, I started to research Walter living in Mount Shasta after, traveling to all these places and then coming back to the
Right.
mountain.
Yeah.
And it all started to sink in. And then I read, I want to show my favorite book, is the Universal One by
Okay.
Walter. It's one of his greatest pieces. I mean, he's written many books, but this is the most like complete. Like, if you really want to nerd out, this is the one because it's got
Right.
all the charts and diagrams. But if you're just looking for an introduction, I would check out. It's called a New Concept of the Universe.
Uh-huh.
It's a very small book, quick read, but it gives you the basic understanding of what he's bringing forward, and you can find that on philosophy.org.
Uh-huh. Philosophy.org.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I know we're gonna have a long list of links that go with the description for the video and the audio.
Yeah,
Great.
and living in Shasta, studying Walter, and then um, also a spiritual union with the soulmate really was kind of the trigger for. I mean, I had brainstormed on creating a model, but it didn't really come into completion until I had this deep connection with someone, a soulmate, and there once again we have the male female balance, right?
Right.
And it's just like a no-brainer. It's like, okay, it's got to be born. It wants to be born, and so OmniCore, it just kind of happened in a day,
Uh-huh.
and I was kind of just blown away at myself. It's like, wow, there it is. This is what's been floating around in my brain for so long, and it just got birthed.
Yeah.
So,
That.
and it's revealing more and more to me every day. It has a consciousness of its own.
Mm-hmm.
It's got legs of its own. It's totally taken off. It's gaining a lot of interest worldwide. I've been selling online
Uh-huh.
for the last 5 years, and just this last summer, just a huge explosion of interest. This is a great sign that people are really interested now in
Yes.
this knowledge. And Tesla thought it was going to be another 1,000 years, but I think we're ahead of schedule according to Tesla.
I like that.
A good thing.
I like that. And it could be that so many of us are now tuning into it because we start that new direction and that process. So who knows how long it takes to become more mainstream,
Right.
become accepted, but it can definitely shift the trajectory of where we're going to embrace this. And the more of us that tune in and understand it and adopt it, and understand what we are and who we are, as you were
Yeah.
talking about before, as this is being a mirror reflection of us.
Right.
Yeah, powerful, very powerful.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people talking about, I mean, we started with Thrive, right? Remember the Thrive documentary?
Absolutely.
Right. And they talked about the fundamental shapes, the vector equilibrium, the torus. And the torus is also working in this. It's like fields, torsion fields. So that's also in there. But they didn't quite put it all together into one model. They were just like, well, here's the vector equilibrium, here's the torus. We know free energy's it's got something to do with this. And the second one was pretty good too. Did you see that one? The
I
second
haven't
drive.
yet. I've wanted to, and I just have been all over the other places.
Uh-huh. Well, there's already people with free energy devices. They interviewed, I think there was a guy in Africa. I think it had water in it as well. It had some water.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, they're out there. The free energy devices are out there. We just have to, create the space for that to come forward and people not to be afraid and to, yeah.
Yeah. Fear can, there's caution in following intuition and guidance, and it's a little different than fear that kind of generates a field that creates a reality that you don't want.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
This is so cool. I'm thinking about the synchronicities in my personal life of I have built a copper Gencia crystal that doesn't look nearly as uniform as yours because it's really tricky to get it all to piece together and stay in place. And I didn't.
That's my perfectionist in the
Good
group.
job. Maybe that's why this is in your hands. And
Mhm.
and I just had it as a Genis,
Janisa Crystal.
thank you. I just had it as a Janissa crystal. And then I connected with a soulmate partner on Mount Shasta when I moved to Mount Shasta. And he was actually inspired he said, why don't you put a copper coil in the middle of it? And then he had a little quartz crystal ball that he ended up hanging in the center of it, really similar to what you have. And there's just so many interesting synchronicities that I'm paying attention to because I knew when I met you, I think it's when I found out you had land near the same place where I was living on the mountain, or maybe you had access to it. You were spending time on some land.
Oh yeah,
Way out
I've been
there in the high
stewarding,
desert area.
yeah.
Yeah, you were stewarding. That's right. And so I don't know. It's fascinating to me that there's also something about the energy of place, and that that the OmniCore I think maybe wanted to be birthed somehow
Oh yeah, Mount Shasta played a huge
through the
role.
mountain and the land.
Absolutely. And the people I've met here. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a huge part of my journey, Mount Shasta, and to create these in the field of Mount Shasta is super empowering, and just it doesn't tire me, like
Mm.
it gives me energy to do this work, and it's now my full-time job. I've left the matrix. I've left the 9 to 5. I made the leap, and
Great.
all is really going well in that area. And there's a lot of room to grow with this, and I know there's other devices that want to come forward based on the wave field technology. And I actually have a lot of other devices I have developed, and you can find them on my Etsy site. I have wands that
Great.
utilize sound tuning forks
Uh-huh.
used for healing and acupressure. I have the tower. I think you noticed the tower
I
here.
wanted to see the tower.
This is the Omni tower. So if we can build this on our large scale, right, which is
Yeah.
basically a Tesla tower,
Okay.
well, also maybe his design can be upgraded by applying the OmniCore,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to the top. I see these structures all over the planet, like in the new
Yeah.
paradigm, and they're harvesting the naturally occurring energy that's
Uh-huh.
all around us, and just freeing us from this, corporate greed.
Okay. And
Uh,
what did you call this one that you were just holding up?
this is the Omni Tower.
Omni Tower. Right.
It's a pyramid. It's got a pyramid. It's the golden pyramid.
I was gonna say it's got a 72-degree base angle, right?
Yeah, that's the golden pyramid, right? It's
Right.
based on the pi ratio.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's got a tor. It's got a torus. It's got two toruses, one
Yes.
at the base,
Uh-huh.
and then one here at the top. And you can place crystals, any crystal of your choice, into the device. to amplify the crystal and to charge it up.
Right.
And then the OmniCore at the top.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it's reminding this is reminding me of a crop circle. I had a friend who did a similar sculpture. He did the phi ratio pyramid like yours, and he just put like a donut at the top, so it wasn't three-dimensional. And my sacred geometry group at the time, we really liked that sculpture, and we were also deconstructing and redrawing crop circles just to explore it all, and hearing about how they would just appear suddenly, you know, like overnight or even sometimes within hours. And so we said, well, what if we as a class just focus on some geometric form and see what happens? And we said, well, okay, let's try it. We don't know, you know, it's like late September, end of crop circle season, because the crops were, you know, dying off or being harvested. And we said, well, let's put it out there anyway. And we chose his sculpture that looked really similar. And, you know, it didn't appear overnight, but it was the third crop circle that appeared in England the following spring.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
It was very interesting to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just thought I'd mention that.
So cool. I love crop circles. There's a lot of codes in those for sure.
Definitely. I can't claim to know what they all are. There's so many of them, and ironically, I ended up spending some time on the Big Island, Hawaii, with William Gazecki, who did one of the first crop circle documentaries called Crop Circle Quest for Truth. And it was fascinating because he really did a great job looking for the evidence, and also, you know, just interviewing people's experiences, eyewitnesses, and some of the science that was studied on the soil and the, you know, the nodes of the plants and all of that. And so it was really interesting to learn about and know that, yeah, it's not always just people from the pub with the boards on their feet.
No, I don't think so. No, yeah, there's something more going on
There's some
there. I mean, yeah, there's some man-made ones, but
Yeah,
no, there's something going on there. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I had another thought I wanted to touch on, and that was, well, that might have been it, really. You've shared Walter Russell's influence and the OmniCore and how that relates to some of your other technologies that you have available on your Etsy store. What's your Etsy store?
You can just search OmniCore on Etsy, or you can go etsy.shop/OmniCore Tech.
Okay, and I think you just cut out. Would you say that again?
Okay, it's etsy.com
Uh-huh.
/shop/OmniCore Tech.
Okay.
Or you can just search OmniCore in Etsy, and I'm the only person selling anything with that name.
Yeah.
Here's-
And it's spelled, if you're on the podcast, it's Omni, O-M as in Mary, N as in Nancy, I, core, C as in cat, O-R as in Randy, E, OmniCore.
Right.
Okay. And the whole name Omni.
Yeah, let's break down the name.
Yes. Tell me
Okay,
what
well,
you know about
Omni meaning omnipresent, meaning everywhere, the core of everything.
Right.
And core meaning the center, the heart,
the
pulse, the rhythm. And so Walter, you know, he said, well, if I were gonna say a few words about, if I were gonna try to describe what it is, I would say the best way to do that would refer to it as two-way rhythmic balanced interchange.
Two-way rhythmic balanced interchange. And I have also experienced that in my meditations. Didn't have a name for it, and I didn't understand the significance of it at the time. I mean, I intuitively kind of knew, but then it's like, what do I do with that? And you're offering a lot more understanding to me, like what to do
Great.
with that.
I'm so glad. That's why I'm here to clarify, because
Uh,
I had all these questions too, and now I feel like it's being filtered through me. I can simplify it. Truth is simple. Ultimate
right.
truth is simple. It's only in the illusion that things start to look complex and more, you know, broken apart, and it's ultimately all comes back to one, and that's cool.
And yeah, super cool. Yeah. So, Seth, thank you so much for joining me today
Oh,
and
you're welcome.
sharing.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back sometime whenever you want to share some more.
Sure.
I'm all down for that. And I look forward to seeing, what our listeners have to say. If they have questions, I encourage people to contact me through sacredgeometryportal.com if they have questions, and reach out to you to experience the OmniCore. So, yeah, thanks
Totally.
again.
I also have a Facebook page where I'm always posting supportive information, and it's a great place to open dialogue with people. And I'm posting stuff on new developments. So if you just search OmniCore on Facebook, you can find me,
Mhm.
OmniCore Tech.
Yeah, it's a great page. I really enjoy
Mhm.
it. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for doing this work.
Thank
Get
you, Lisa.
these messages out there, but the core of it being so simple of what we truly are. We're creators, we're connected to source, we're very powerful.
We never left the womb.
We never left the womb. I love that. All things are right here, right now,
Right.
potent in the stillness. Yeah. Well,
All
thank you
right,
so
dear.
much.
Bless you.
Bless you too. Really appreciate this. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast has been a production of Sacred Geometry Portal. Dive deeper into the portal by subscribing at sacredgeometryportal.com. Find opportunities to learn directly with Elizabeth by going to Sacred Geometry Portal on Patreon. Infinite fractal blessings, and thank you for listening.